How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chavdalad, Daf 24 of Masechta of Zevachim. Okay, Givaldik. So there's two sections, two major sections I would say to today's Daf Chavdalad of Masechta Zevachim. The first one being the requirement for Kohanim to stand on the ground, that there can't be anything between them and the ground. The Mishnah had talked about that they can't be stepping on a vessel or on an animal or on another Kohen's feet, right? So we are going to discuss that. That's the first section of today's Daf. That I would say is probably the softer section. I'd say the lighter, easier section. And then the next section is the requirement for Kohanim to use their right hand. Right? What did the Mishnah say? Wow, the Mishnah is already getting further and further away. The Mishnah had said, Kibel bismo pasul Reb Shimon machshir. Machlokes between the Chacham and Reb Shimon about if a Kohen did Kabbalas Adam with the vessel in his left hand, is that kosher or not? So the requirement for Kohanim to use their right hand. Do they have to use their right hand? Don't they have to use their right hand? In what case? In what context? So that is going to be, I'd say, really the major part of today's Daf. So that is what we have in store for us on Daf Chof Daled of Masechta Zevachim. All right, friends, we are going to begin on Daf Chof Daled Omid Aleph. 3 lines into the Omid at the 2 dots. Omid Al gabi kelim, al gabi behema, al gabi ragli chaveru pasul. If you have a Kohen who is working, he's doing avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, and he is not standing with feet on the floor, feet on the ground. Rather, he's standing on vessels. He's standing on an animal. He's standing on his friend's feet. He's stepping on his friend's toes, and he does the avodah that way in such a state. Pasul. Minalan, how do we know this? Tana, Tiver Bishmol, top of the Bishmol, Hoel Viritzpa. Okay, so it looks like it says Mikadeshes. Rashi says Mikudeshes. So let's go with that. Hoel Viritzpa Mikudeshes, since the floor of the Beis Hamikdash is holy. Uchlishar is Mikudashim, and the vessels that the Kohanim work with are holy. Maklesharis lo yedavar chotzitz beino levein klesharis. Just like when it comes to the Kohanim working with the klesharis, working with the vessels, there cannot be anything in between their flesh and the vessels. We learned this the other day with regard to the bandages, right? Having bandages on the fingers, and we said, wait, but isn't there going to be a chatzitza? We had to say maybe it was in the top of the hand, maybe it was the left hand, etc. But when Kohanim work with the klesharis, they must have direct contact. There can't be anything in between. And klesharis are mikudashim. They're kadosh. So the same thing when it comes to the ritzpah, to the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, which is also kadosh. That when the Kohanim do their avodah, they must have their feet on the floor without anything in between. Not vessels, not animals, not their friends, not their colleagues' feet. Utzricha, and we need all 3 scenarios. The scenario of the vessel, the scenario of the animal, and the scenario of the colleague's foot. Diashminan kli, because if we would only have the scenario of the vessel, mishum de lav mino, de basar ninu, because a vessel is not flesh. People are flesh. Vessels aren't flesh. So since you're standing on something that isn't flesh, so I can understand why it would be a chatzitza. Aval behema de mino de basaru, but a animal, which is another type of a flesh, maybe it could be okay. Maybe it would not be a chatzitza. Eimalo, maybe it should be okay. Ve'ashminon behema, and if we say no, you can't stand on an animal. De lav mina de adamu, because it's not a human. Aval chavero de adamhu, but standing on your colleague's feet, that your colleague is a person just like you're a person. We're all humans. Maybe it should be okay. Emelo, maybe I would say it's all right. Tzricha, it's not all right. You have to stand directly on the floor when working in the Beis Hamikdash. Tani, we learn about Rabbi Eliezer, Raglo achas ala kli, raglo achas ala ritzbo. If a kohen has one foot on a vessel and the other foot on the floor, raglo achas ala even, raglo achas ala ritzbo, one foot on a stone and another foot on the floor. Royin kol she'ilu yinotol akli v'sinotol even. We say, well, here's how we determine if it's going to be acceptable or unacceptable. If we were to remove the vessel or the stone, yochol lamod al raglo, and the kohen would still be able to stand still, would be able to stand on the other foot without falling over. Araglo v'yavod, and do his avoda in the Beis Hamikdash. Avodah ksher, so that's fine. So the avoda is ksher, right? So meaning, if he, so let's go back to for a second. But if not, then the avoda is psula. Meaning, if he's putting so much of his weight on the vessel or on the stone, that if you were to remove the vessel or the stone, he would not be able to stand because he would be off balance now. So then that's putting too much weight, relying too much on the vessel or on the stone. However, if we could remove the vessel or the stone from under his foot, and he would still be able to stand on the other foot and do his work that way, well then it would be the avodah would be kshera, because it would not be considered like he was relying enough on the stone or on the vessel, and it would be considered like he's sufficiently relying on his foot. Anybody ever been to Shuk Machin Yehuda? Hillel, you know what I'm talking about? Hillel, I'm talking about those bricks. If I say, imagine you're walking down Shuk Machin Yehuda and you step on one of those bricks, you must know exactly what I'm talking about, Hillel. I don't even have to say more. Let us know on WhatsApp. When I talk about walking down Shuk Machin Yehuda or down Agrippa Street and you step on one of those bricks, Hillel, do you know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about those bricks. Those bricks, when you step on them and you're wearing sandals or you're wearing shorts, and all of a sudden water spritzes up from the brick and your feet get all wet and muddy water gets all over your legs because the brick is loose and the power washers have been there spritzing up the place and getting water in between all the cracks, and you step on it and it goes flying and you get all wet. That's the bricks that we're talking about. So that's the bricks that we're talking about. Sorry, I was just thinking about my analogy. I had a new way of thinking about the power washers. It's not shaykh. It's not shaykh. It's not nice. Okay. Akoponim. So that's what I was distracted about, though. So those bricks, okay? So again, by Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Ami asks a kashin nidalvlo even. So if you have a brick or a stone in the Beis Hamikdash on the floor, and it comes loose, V'amar alel mao, and the kohen is standing on a loose stone. So now, how does that affect the kosherness of his avoda? Look, if there's no plan to set it back properly, and it's just going to be a loose stone forever, indefinitely, well then it's a chatzitza, it's a problem. It's considered standing on a stone rather than on the floor of the azar. But the question is, if the intention is to fix it, and the intention is to set it back in place. Since the intention is to set it in place, so then it's considered like it is already set in place, which is interesting because this is not going to be on today's daf, it's going to be on tomorrow's daf, right? Considering ultimate realities as if they've already happened, like ultimate results as if we can already consider them to be resulted now. But anyways, so do we say that since the idea is to set the stone in place, we can consider it like it is currently set in place, in which case it is considered like you are stepping on the floor rather than on a loose stone? Or dilma hashtamia ha tlisha. Or do we say, look, the fact of the matter is that right now it has not yet been set in place. Right now it is loose, and therefore it's possible. What do we say? Rabazute ba'i lahachi. Rabazute asks in the following way. So that was one version. Here's another version. Chomer asks, Nekra even if a stone didn't just get loose, it got removed, it got uprooted, and there's a hole in the floor. And the kohen is standing in the hole in the floor, and he's doing the avoda from inside the hole in the floor. My kami boyale, which worms of Amabim Koma Maus, my kami by this, what are we asking? Ki Kodesh Duvid Ritzpa Elyona Kodesh Odilma Ad Le Ara Ditahoma Kodesh. So we seem to be asking again, Ki Kodesh Duvid Ritzpa Elyona Kodesh, that when King David was Makdish, the land that the Beis Hamikdash was going to be built on, was that only the top layer? Oduma adla aris ditomor, even the land beneath, like all the land, if you keep digging and digging all the way down to China, all of that land is also kadosh. Does that mean that when you get to the other side, is that like an argument to say that China? Okay, I don't want to go there. Reb Andy, you were just in Hong Kong. Hey, Reb Andy, what do you say? What do you think? Well, first of all, I guess it's a shaila. If you go to the Beis Hamikdash and dig, would you get all the way to Hong Kong? That's a shaila. I don't know. All right, let's go weiter. Or maybe King David was not just makdish the top layer of the land that he was makdish for the top of the Beis Hamikdash, but rather all the way down as well. Then why are we just asking about if one stone is removed and you're standing in that place? Ask about the whole azori. Ask about the whole azori, because it was all built and very different than how it was when King David was makdish it. What was that? Was that the Sadeh of Aravna? So the Olam Pshitale the Ad Aris the Toma Kaddish. No, look, here's the thing. Certainly, King David was not just makdish like the top level of the land. No, of course not. Also beneath that as well. If you dig it up and you're going to build, install floors and building on top of it and below it, whatever, that's also going to be fine. The question is, the question is, if you're in the Azara and a stone in the Azara comes out of place, now there's a hole in the floor and you're standing in the hole in the floor and doing the avoda, is that kind of would that be considered a normal enough, a regular enough way, an acceptable enough way to be doing the avoda, in which case it would be kosher? Or do we say that is just simply not derech sherus, that isn't the way that avoda is done in the Beis Hamikdash, and it would be possible? That is the shaila. We say teku, we say let's go weiter. Okay, and now we get up to the next section of the daf, really the second of two sections of the daf, the requirement for Kohanim to use their right hand, and this is really going to be the big sugya of today's daf. So the Mishnah had said, Kibel b'smol pasuk Reb Shimon Machshir, that if a kohen does Kabbalas Adam and he's holding the klesharis, he's holding the vessel in his left hand, so the Tanakama says pasul. Reb Shimon says kosher. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, be'etzba v'lokach melamed shelo kabbalah ela b'yom be'etzba v'nasa melamed shelo nesina ela b'yamin. Okay, there's a lot here. So I'm going to read to you the pasuk that we're working with over here. The pasuk is V'lokach hakoin. Now this is Kabbalah Sadam. V'lokach hakoin midam achatos be'etzba'o. So v'lokach hakoin is the Kabbalah Sadam be'etzba'o, with his finger. V'nosan, and he will place it. That's zrikas Sadam. In the case of a korban chatas, he doesn't throw the blood. He literally takes his finger, sticks it into the blood, and then touches it to the corner of the mizbeach. But that's the zrikas adam of the korban chatas. So again, v'lokach hakoin midam chatas, that is kabbalah sadam, and when it says v'nosan, that is essentially zrikas adam. And sandwiched between v'lokach and vinosan is the word be'etzbo with his finger. And what the Chacham are saying, and also it also comes up in Reb Shimon Kilu, that when it says be'etzbo, this is going to be a big part of kind of our work that we have ahead of us now, working with the words be'etzbo, yad. We're going to see even just the word kohen. They all have different effects, I guess. They're going to be part of the discussion about the requirement to use one's right hand. So here we're saying that the word be'etzbo, which we're assuming means that you have to use your right hand, be'etzbo, with your right finger, or by korban chatas, by zrika sadam, by nesina sadam, it's with your right finger, but otherwise we're talking about your right hand for kabbalah sadam, for zrika sadam, by other kabbanos, we're talking about your right hand. This is ultimately learned out from Mitzorah, because Mitzorah, it says, what does it say by Mitzorah actually? By Mitzorah it says, wait, where? Actually, where is the wait, why can't I actually find, where is the pasuk that, there's a pasuk that says, Mitzorah, it says Kohen, it says Yamin, and it says Kohen, it says Etzba, and it also says Yamin. But now I can't find that pasuk. Oh, it says, no. Okay, wait, no, that's the Shemin. Okay, I'm gonna have to find that. But basically, we learned it out from Mitzorah, where it says, by Mitzorah, where it says Kohen, it says Etzba, I believe, and there it says Yamin. So we say that just like by Mitzorah, it has to be your right hand, your right finger, and also here by the, when it says Etzba, we want to say when it says Etzba over here, it means Davka, your right hand. So therefore, we have this pasuk which says Vilakach, which is Kabbalah Sadam, and it says Vinosam, which is Zrika Sadam, and in between there is Etzba, which we want to say means essentially you have to use your right hand. So the Chacham want to say that what do you have to use your right hand for? For both. For Kabbalah Sadam and for Zrika Sadam. So, now, Tana Rabbana, the rabbis taught, Be'etzba Vilakach. It says Be'etzba Vilakach, meaning we have Etzba in the context of Vilakach, of Kabbalah Sadam. Melamed Shalote Kabbalah Ela B'Yamin. So from here we learn that the Kabbalah Sadam, Dafka needs to be with the Kohen's right hand. He has to be holding the vessel in his right hand. Be'etzba Vinosan, and it also says Be'etzba right next to the word Vinosin, which is Zrika Sadam. Melamed Shalote Nisina Ela B'Yamin. So in the context of a korban chatas, it means that he'll take his right hand, his right finger, he'll dip it into the blood, and then touch the corner of the Mizbeach with his bloody finger. And it's going to be his right bloody finger. Reb Shimon says, Reb Shimon, V'chinemra yad be-Kabbalah. Okay, so it's going to take some time to kind of work through Reb Shimon's shita, but here we're beginning to see Reb Shimon's shita. So the Tanakama just said that you have to use your right hand for Kabbalah Sadam, for Zrika Sadam. Reb Shimon is saying you don't need to use your right hand. So Reb Shimon says, Reb Shimon, V'chinemra yad be-Kabbalah, ela be'etzbo v'nosan. It doesn't say, I'm sorry, yad be-Kabbalah, ela be'etzbo v'nosan. So it says, Reb Shimon, it doesn't say yad, hand, when it comes to Kabbalah Sadam, ela be'etzbo, rather with one's finger, v'nosan, and he places it. Shalote nesina ela biyamin. That the nesina by korban chatos, the nesina sadam, the korban, the kohen sticking his finger into the blood and then placing it on the mizbeach, that needs to be the right finger. That's all we know. Ela, right? I'm reading that again. Ela be'etzbo v'nosan. His finger, and he places it. When it comes to korban chatos, the kohen places his right finger in the blood and then touches that to the mizbeach. That is what needs to be done with the right hand. Again, shalotei nesina ela biyamin, that the nesina of the dam, this, as we're going to see later on in the daf, this isn't even zrika sadam for other korbanos. It's davka the nesinas adam by korban chatas. The kohen needs to stick his right finger into the blood and then place that on the corner of the mizbeach. Hovelo nemra yad b'Kabbalah, and therefore, since by Kabbalah Sadam it doesn't say yad, Kibel bismol kosher. Therefore, says Reb Shimon, since it does not say yad by Kabbalas Hadam, therefore by Kabbalas Hadam, if he received the blood with his left hand, that would be kosher according to Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon Manavshach, says the Gemara. Okay, I don't understand Reb Shimon's opinion. Again, what's the machlokes? The Tanna Kama says that both Kabbalas Hadam and Zrikas Hadam has to be done with the right hand. Reb Shimon says Nesinas Hadam of a Korban Chatas has to be done with the right finger, but that's it. The Kabbalas Hadam does not need to be done with the right hand. And the question is, why not? Reb Shimon Mimanavshach. If he holds of the Gezerah Shaveh, maybe does Rashi say here? Where am I? Where even? Okay. Okay, fine. That by Mitzorah it says, basically we learn out from Mitzorah that wherever it says Yad, so it's going to be the right hand. So if he holds of this Gezerah Shaveh, right, as Rashi points out, right, and Yad the Kmitza mi Mitzorah, that by Kmitza, by a kometz, taking a fistful of flour by a korban mincha, that has to be with your right hand, just like by a mitzorah, we're talking about yado hayemonis, the right hand. So if he learns the gezerah shaveh, so kilo nemer yad b'kabbalah ma'ihave, so then even though it doesn't say yad, this is a question of Reb Shimon, even though it doesn't say yad by Kabbalas Hadam, it does say etzba. And it says etzba also by a mitzorah. By mitzorah, it also says etzba. And therefore, just like, so if Reb Shimon holds of the Gezerah Shaveh of Yad, he should be able to say etzba, to say that by Kabbalas Hadam, since it says etzba, we should also require your right hand. And if he Bichlal doesn't hold of the Gezerah Shaveh at all, well then kinemra yad b'kabbalah ma'ihave. If he doesn't hold of the Gezerah Shaveh at all, so then what's he making such a big deal about? Well, it doesn't say yad by Kabbalas Hadam. Even if it did say yad, if he doesn't hold the Gezerah Shaveh, then the fact that it says yad isn't helpful, because which hand? Yad only becomes helpful to teach me the right hand if you hold of the Gezerah Shaveh from Mitzorah. But if you don't bichlal hold of that Gezerah Shaveh, so why is Reb Shimon making such a big deal about, well, it doesn't say yad by Kabbalas Hadam. Even if it said yad, we wouldn't know that it means the right hand. So again, even if he does hold of the Gezerah Shaveh, well, then the fact that it says etzba, you should hold the Gezerah Shaveh by etzba also, and say that you should have to use your right. You should have to use your right. Okay, it's important that it says etzba versus yad, but let's assume it means that if it says etzba, so we should be able to make the Gezerah Shaveh to say that you have to use your right hand for even Kabbalas Hadam. And if you don't hold of the Gezerah Shaveh, well then even if it said yad, how would that even help? You wouldn't be using it for a Gezerah Shaveh. So Omer of Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, the Olam Leis like Gezerah Shaveh. So Rav Yehuda says, well, Reb Shimon does not hold of the Gezerah Shaveh. So why is he making such a big deal of, well, it doesn't say the word yad by Kabbalah. Who cares? Even if it did say yad, what are you going to do with it? This is what Reb Shimon is saying. Yad Yemonis b'Kabbalah. It doesn't explicitly say by Kabbalas Hadam Yad Yemonis. It doesn't explicitly say by Kabbalas Hadam that you have to use your right hand, and it's not just saying that it doesn't say hand. It's saying it doesn't say right hand, because it doesn't say right hand explicitly by Kabbalas Hadam. You don't need to use your right hand by Kabbalas Hadam. And therefore, since it doesn't say Yad Yamin by Kabbalas Hadam, it doesn't say right hand by Kabbalas Hadam, so kibel small kosher. Therefore, Reb Shimon says, it doesn't say you have to use your right hand, so you can use your left hand. Omelei Rabba says to Rav Yehuda, if that's the case, afilu nesina nami. But if that's the case, then why does why do you keep on saying Rab? Why does Reb Shimon require that the nesinas hadam by a korban chatas has to be done with one's right hand? Then it doesn't say etzbo hayemonis. It just says etzbo. Why can't it be your left hand? More so, is that actually true, by the way? Rav Yehuda said that Reb Shimon does not hold of the Gzeir Shava of Yad Yad, but is that true? Does Reb Shimon really not hold of the Gzeir Shava of Yad Yad? We learn about Reb Shimon, says Reb Shimon, Kol makom shenemar Yad ein ela yamin, etzba ein ela yamin. Says Reb Shimon that wherever it says Yad, it means the right hand. Whenever it says etzba, it means the right finger. So he does hold of the Gzeir Shava. So rather says Rave, Reb Shimon does hold of the Gzeir Shava. Okay, so if he holds of the Gzeir Shava, so then it says etzba, and etzba, he just said, means yamin. So we should say that Kabbalah Saddam also has to be with your right hand. However, this is what Reb Shimon is saying. It says etzba. It says etzba in the pasuk, and you're saying he says whenever it says etzba, it means the right finger. But the argument that's trying to be made as a challenge against Reb Shimon is that, well, it says etzba, which means right finger in the context of Kabbalah Saddam. Therefore, Kabbalah Saddam, what? Kabbalah Saddam has to be done with your right hand. It doesn't say hand. It says finger. You don't do Kabbalah Saddam with your finger. So therefore, the fact that it says etzba means that we're not talking about Kabbalah Saddam. Kabbalah Saddam, you have to hold the vessel. You're not going to hold the vessel with your finger. So therefore, it clearly can't be talking about Kabbalah Saddam. So etzba means right, but it applies to applying the damachatas with your right finger to the mizbeach. Yeah, sure, that's done with your finger. Kabbalah Saddam is not done with your finger, so it's clearly not talking about that. So again, Ella Omar Ravi rather says Ravi, Lolam Islik Gzeir Shava, Reb Shimon does hold of the Gzeir Shava, Vachi Kamar. This is what Reb Shimon is saying. B'chinemer Yad b'Kabbalah. Does it say Yad by Kabbalah? No, it doesn't. However, Lo Nemar Yad b'Kabbalah, and since it doesn't say Yad by the Kabbalah, all it says is finger. Ella Etzba, it says finger. V'ef sure l'Kabbalah be'etzba. You can't do Kabbalah Saddam. You can't hold a vessel with your finger. So clearly, the etzba, which is a requirement for the right finger, is not referring to Kabbalah Saddam, which is irrelevant for fingers. So kibel b'smol kosher. Therefore, if you do Kabbalah Saddam, which you do by holding a vessel in your hand, and you receive it with your left hand, that's okay because the requirement of right doesn't apply to Kabbalah Saddam. Omerle, Rav Samarbei, Rav Ashi, the Ravina, but Rav Samarbei, Rav Ashi asked Ravina an interesting question. Efshir do avle ozen l'sfas mizrak u'mekabel, but can't you make, think like, I'm imagining like a small little teacup. We have a little, the little hand is a cute little hand that you could stick your finger in. So in the mizrak, in the vessel that you do Kabbalah Saddam with, can't you technically make a little loop in there to stick your finger in? And then you actually can do Kabbalah Saddam by holding the vessel with your finger. So why are we assuming that just because it says etzba means that it can't apply to Kabbalah Saddam? Etzba can apply to Kabbalah Saddam. Make a little ring to stick your finger in. Ella Omar Abaye, rather, says Abaye, b'mikra nidrash l'fanav v'l'achariv kamiflagei. Rather, here is the machlokas between the Chacham and Reb Shimon. It's a machlokas about how to darshan the pasuk. That the pasuk had said, V'loka, I'm reading the pasuk, V'loka chakoyin midamachatas be'etzbo v'nosan akanos mizbech. So as we pointed out earlier, be'etzbo, with your finger, which means your right finger, is sandwiched between v'lokach and v'nosan. So the Tanakama says that be'etzbo can apply in both directions, apply both ways. It can apply both to Kabbalah Saddam, which was written before etzba, as well as to Zrika Saddam, which was written after etzba, no problem. Whereas Reb Shimon says that etzba is only going to apply to what follows it, i.e. v'nosan, Zrika Saddam, or really more specifically Nesina Saddam by a Korban Chatas. It's not going to apply to what precedes it, i.e. Kabbalah Saddam. So that is the machlokas between Reb Shimon and the Chacham. So the Chacham say that both the Kabbalah Saddam and Zrika Saddam have to be done with your right hand because they say that etzba essentially applies to Kabbalah Sadam, which is before it in the pasuk, and Zrika Sadam, which is after it in the pasuk. Reb Shimon says that the requirement of using your right, specifically your right finger by Korban Chatas, is specifically only going to be by Nisina Sadam of Korban Chatas, because that is what's written after Etzba. It's not going to apply to what's written before Etzba, the Kabbalah's Hadam. And now we see the Shita of Reb Shimon's son, Reb Elazar Reb Shimon. Amar Abai says, Abai had Reb Elazar Reb Shimon, Mafka Mida Avua, Umafka Mida Rabbanon. Reb Elazar Reb Shimon's Shita is taka different than both his father's Shita as well as the Shita of the Rabbanon. Tisani, that we learn about Reb Elazar Reb Shimon, Omer says Reb Elazar Reb Shimon, Kol Makom Shenemar Etzba B'Kabbalah. Look, if it says Etzba by Kabbalah Sadam, such as in our pasuk, right? The lokach akoyin midamachatos be'etzbo, that the koyin takes from the damachatos with his finger. So, etzba be'kabbalah, shina be'kabbalah apostle. So you have to use your right hand for if etzba is written by Kabbalah Sadam, it means your right finger. You have to use your right finger or your right hand by Kabbalah Adam. If you use your left hand, it's going to be apostle. Benesina kosher. But if you use your left hand for Nesina Sadam, it'll be kosher, right? Meaning if the etzba, i.e. the requirement for yamin, for the right hand, is written in the context of Kabbalah Sadam, so only the Kabbalah Sadam has to be done with the right. If you did Nesina Sadam with your left hand, it'll be kosher. And wherever it says etzba by Nesina, so then Shina b'Nesina possible b'Kabbalah kosher. Well, then if you use your left hand for Nesina Sadam, it'll be possible. But if you use your left hand for Kabbalah Sadam, it will be kosher, right? When the requirement for using your right hand is by Nesina Sadam. So by Nesina Sadam, you have to use your right hand. You don't have to use it for Kabbalah Sadam. Ve'echa nemer etzba b'Nesina. Where do we see etzba for Nesina? By the Miluim. Dichsiv v'lakachto midam apar v'nasata al kanas mezbeach be'etzba echa. It says v'nasata. So interesting. It says v'lakachto, but it says after it says v'nasata al kanas mezbeach be'etzba echa with your finger. Because of mikro nidrash lefanav v'lo lefnei fanav. And Reb Elazar Reb Shimon holds that the pasuk is going to be darshan from what's before it, not from what's before it. So meaning when it says v'lakachto, which would be Kabbalah Sadam, midam apar v'nasato, which is Nesina Sadam, al kanas mezbeach be'etzba echa, which is the key word to teach us the right. So be'etzba echa is going to go on what's before it, i.e. v'nasata, not on what which is also before that, which is v'lakachta. No. So therefore, Reb Elazar Reb Shimon would say that be'etzba echa with your finger, i.e. the requirement to use your right hand, would be for Nesinas Adam, not for Kabbalah's Hadam. Okay. Because over, specifically by the Miluim, because over Mikro Nidrash Lefanav, V'lo Lefnei Fanav, V'lo La'achar, but also not afterwards. He says Mikro is not darshaned afterwards. So it's darshaned for what's beforehand, but not what's afterwards, and also not what's beforehand. So therefore, in our pasuk, by the Korban, by the where am I? Oh, interesting. Okay. So this initial pasuk is actually by Mizbeach Ha'olah. Okay, but that's fine. Reb Shimon's shita still though is that you only need to use your, as we're going to see later, is that you only need to use your right hand by Korban Chatas to put on the Kohanim and Mizbeach. But anyways, this pasuk, is this also as okay, but there's also a pasuk by Korban Chatas. But anyways, the initial pasukim by the Korban Chatas, by the Korban Olah, Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says that the Kabbalah needs to be with the right hand, but not the Nesina, not the Zrika. So we have now three shitas effectively by Korbanos. You have the shita of the Chacham who say the Kabbalah and the Zrika need to be with your right hand. You have the shita of Reb Shimon who says the Zrika, the Nesina, as we're going to see specifically by Korban Chatas, has to be with your right hand, but not the Kabbalah's Adam, or as we're going to see later, even Zrika's Adam, by other Korbanos. And then you have the opinion of Reb Elazar Reb Shimon who says that the right hand needs to be used for Kabbalah's Adam, but not for Zrika's Hadam. Just to fix something that I said before, I was looking at that first pasuk. I saw it said Mizbach Ha'olah. It's the Mizbach Ha'olah, but it does say V'lokach HaKohen Midam Achatos, right? So these psukim that we've been talking about with the Lokach and V'nosan, those are talking about Korban Chatas. I had made a mistake a minute ago. I said it was talking about Korban Olah. No, it was Mizbach Ha'olah, which is basically the the Mizbeach Achitzon and the Azar. But we are talking about the Korban Chatas. Now we are going to dig deeper into the shitas of the Chachamim, of Reb Shimon, of how they darshan out these psukim for the requirement of your right hand. Amar Rabba Bar Chana Amar, so it says Reb Yochanan, but it seems like the proper, it seems like the preferred girsa here is Rish Lakish. So Amar Rabba Bar Chana Rish Lakish, Kol Makom Shenemar Etzba V'chuna. Okay, any pasuk where it says Etzba, finger, and Kihuna, and the assumption for now is it needs both of those keywords. Kihuna, like Kohen, Kohanim, and Etzba, finger. Eina Elayamin, we're talking about the right hand. Okay, if it says Kihuna and Etzba in a pasuk, we're talking about the right hand. So as of now, it's entering our mind that it requires both of these magic words. The pasuk says, "V'lokach hakoin midam achatas betzbo." So when it says "V'lokach hakoin midam achatas betzbo," so it has both koin and etzba. So then it means we're talking about the right hand. V'yolef mimetzora. This is what I was looking for before. This was right. It says v'yolef mimetzora, and we learn out from Mitzora the Chsiv where it says v'tovel hakoin as etzba'o hayimanis. That's the pasuk I was looking for. And that by Mitzora it says koin and it says etzbo, and there it says yimanis. It means over there it says dafka, the right hand. So there you have it. So we learn from Mitzora that it says by Mitzora, Koin and Etzbo, and it's talking about Hayimanis, the right one. So therefore, whenever it says, right, did we say whenever? Kol Makom, wherever it says Etzba and Kahuna, so it means the right hand. Varei, Kmitza, befrekt the Gemore. What about Kmitza, Kometz, by Kor Mincha, you take a fistful. Deloksiv ba elakuna. By taking a fistful from a kometz, all it says is kihuna. What does the pasuk say? Ve'avia el hakoin, v'komatz hakoin, mimenen melokumso hes goros v'iktem mizbecha. Right, it just says koin, just says kihuna. Vitnan, and we learn in the Mishnah, komatz b'smol pasul. That if you do kmitza with your left hand, it's pasul. You have to use your right hand for kmitza, and yet it doesn't say kihuna and etzba. Elo Omar Rave, says Rave, O etzba, O kuna. Oh, okay. So says Rave, it's actually not both, it's either or. It's either or. If it says either kahuna or etzba, we're talking about the right hand. Amalei Abaye says to Rave, Hare holacha sevarim la kevesh. Is somebody calling me? However, somebody who is taking the limbs of a korban ola to the ramp of the mizbeach. Somebody who's taking the limbs of a korban ola to the ramp of the mizbeach, the chsiv kahuna, there where it says specific. So if Rava just said that it's an either or situation, right? If it says either kahuna or etzba, it means we're talking about the right hand. Well, here's the thing: by holacha zivarim lakevesh, by taking the limbs of a korban ola to the ramp of the mizbeach, it says kihuna. It says kihuna. So based on Rava's shita, kihuna means you would have to use your right hand when bringing the avarim to the kevesh. Dichsiv v'hikriv hakoin es hakol v'hikti amizbecha. That the koin will take everything to the mizbeach and burn on the mizbeach. This is holacha. This is taking the limbs to the mizbeach. And yet, so even though it says kihuna by halachas evarim lakevish, so I would think based on Rava that you would have to use your right hand. But Vitnam, we learn in a Mishnah, haregel shel yamin, that the right leg bismolo uveis ora lachutz would be in his left hand, and he would walk with the skin facing outwards rather than the incision, rather than the cut and the raw meat facing outwards, so that people see skin rather than meat. Now, so what's this talking about? It's talking about, I believe this was about the Korban Talmud, that they would bring, so the Kohen would be carrying not just the right leg, but also the head. he would be carrying the head and the right leg, and we're saying that the head he would carry in his right hand, and the right leg he would carry in his left hand. So even though it says kihuna by Olocha Zivarim Lakevish, it's not strict, doesn't strictly require using your right hand, because we see that the right leg is being carried in the left hand. So it doesn't specifically require using the right hand by Olocha Zivarim Lakevish. So answers the Gemara, Ki aminan o etzba o kuna b'davar ma'akiv kapar dumi de mitzora. Yeah, but the thing, okay, so the Gemara answers, good question. However, the answer is that this idea of Rava, that if it says either kuna or etzba, it means right. That's in the context of an avoda that is ma'akev kapar. Olocha Zivarim Lakevish is not ma'akev kapar, because even if you don't burn, as we've seen, as I don't know if we necessarily seen it so much, but as it's come up in the Gemara, even if you don't do, no, we've seen it in the Gemara. Even if you don't burn, you don't do ekter chalav bevarim. If you don't burn the fats and limbs, you still get kapar. The important thing by kapar is zrikas adam. So therefore, by Olocha Zivarim Lakevish, which is something that is not me'akev kapara, even if you is not ma'akev kapara, so there isn't strictly a requirement to use your right hand, which is why you can carry the right leg in the left hand. Kabbalah. Okay, what about Kabbalah Saddam? Okay, Kabbalah Saddam is of course ma'akev kapara. Tichosav behu, it says by Kabbalah Saddam kihuna. Vidavar ma'akev kaparu. So Kabbalah Saddam is, of course, it's one of the avodos Saddam, so it's ma'akev kapar. And it says kihuna. What does it say? It says v'shachat es ben abakar lifnei Hashem v'krivu bnei Aaron. Right? Is this the pasuk I'm looking for? Yeah. V'krivu bnei Aaron Kohanim es Adam, which I guess is the Kabbalah Saddam. V'zarku es Adam, etc., etc. So by Kabbalah Saddam it says kihuna. V'davar ma'akev b'kapar, and Kabbalah Saddam is ma'akev kapar. Who v'tnan kibel b'small pasul. Okay, we say if you did Kabbalah Saddam with your left hand, it's pasul. Okay, but Reb Shimon machshir. Reb Shimon, however, says that it would be kosher. Reb Shimon, however, says that it would be kosher. How could Reb Shimon say it's kosher? If what Rava is saying is correct, that if it simply says kahuna, it means you have to use your right hand, and so it says by kahuna by Kabbalah Saddam, and Reb Shimon says you can use your left hand. So Reb Shimon tarte boy. Well, Reb Shimon disagrees and says, so according to Reb Shimon Davka, Reb Shimon would say you need both. You need kahuna and etzba. Kahuna alone is not enough. But mi boy Reb Shimon tarte, does Reb Shimon really require both kahuna and etzba? V'atani, we learn in the Bible, Reb Shimon always says, Reb Shimon, kol makom shenemar yad, eno ela yomin, whenever it says yad, it means the right hand, etzba, eno ela yomin. And when it says etzba, also, it means the right hand or the right finger. So don't tell me that Reb Shimon requires both kihuna and etzba. He just said that etzba alone is enough to require the right finger. Lobaya, where am I? Etzba lobaya kihuna. So the Gemara answers, okay, let's more finely define Reb Shimon's shita. So Reb Shimon, yeah, you're right. Reb Shimon, when it says etzba alone, that's enough to require the right finger. Kahuna baya etzba, but kahuna alone is not enough. It would have to say etzba. Essentially, it needs to say etzba, I think, is the point, in order to require the right hand. Kahuna alone is not enough, and therefore by Kabbalah Saddam, Reb Shimon would hold that since it only says kahuna, the right hand is not required for Kabbalah Saddam. V'lekoyin lamali. Then why does it say kohen b'chlal, right? Because by Kabbalah Saddam, the passage that we just read, it says v'shachar es ben abokar lifnei Hashem v'krivu b'nei Aharon haKohanim. Who are the b'nei Aharon, friends? Obviously, the b'nei Aharon are Kohanim. So why does it have to say Kohanim? Just say v'zarku b'nei Aharon. Why does it have to say v'zarku b'nei Aharon haKohanim? The word Kohanim is extra. It must be teaching me something. Is it not teaching me, for example, that you have to use your right hand? B'kihuno. No, it's not teaching me that you have to use your right hand. It's teaching me that they have to be wearing big day kahuna. That's what it's teaching me. Okay, so we were just talking about Kabbalah Saddam. Okay, fine. So Reb Shimon says that by Kabbalah Saddam, you don't need to use your right hand, you can use your left hand. What about Zrika Saddam? Dilo kosav bu ela kihuna. But what about by Zrikas Adam? It also just says Kihuna. What does it say there? V'shachat also ayerech mizbeach tzafon lefnei Hashem v'zarku bnei Aaron Kohanim as dam mizbeach tzaf. It doesn't say anything about etzba over there. It says Kohanim. It says Kihuna. Alright, Zrikas the local bu'elakun. It says Kihuna. V'tanan zark b'small pasul v'lo pligi Reb Shimon. So by Zrikas Adam, it says Kihuna. Doesn't say anything about etzba. It says Kihuna. And we're saying that according to Reb Shimon, that would not be a requirement for right hand. Kuna alone would not be a requirement for right hand. You could use your left hand. And yet, we have a Mishnah that says, Zarak b'small pasul, that if you do Zrikas Adam with your left hand, it's pasul, v'lo palig Reb Shimon. And Reb Shimon does not argue. We want to say that should imply, his silence implies that he concurs. That you have to use your right hand for Zrikas Adam, but why? It only says Kihuna. Omer Abai Polig Bebraisa. Abai says actually, if there's the truth of the matter is, says Abai, there's actually a brisa in which Reb Shimon does argue. The Tanya that we learn in a brisa, Kibel b'small. If Kabbalas Adam was done with your left hand, Pasul Reb Shimon Machshir. It's Pasul Reb Shimon says it's kosher. Zarak b'small, Pasul Reb Shimon Machshir. Same thing. If you do Zrikas Adam with your left hand, pasul. Reb Shimon says kosher. So yeah, the same thing is actually by Zrikas Adam. It only says Kihuna, and Reb Shimon says that it will be kosher to use your left hand for Zrikas Hadam. So far what we've seen by Reb Shimon's Shita is that the left hand is kosher for Shchita, is kosher for Kabbalas Adam, and I didn't mean to say Shchita. We're not talking about Shchita. Is kosher. Left hand is kosher for Kabbalas Adam, and left hand is kosher for Zrikas Adam. And we've seen up until now when he talks about Etzbo V'Nosan that you're going to have to use your right hand for Nesinas Adam by Korban Chadas. So we're going to see it also in another few minutes that he holds that. So basically, Reb Shimon, his Shita is that the left hand can be used for Kabbalas Adam and for Zrikas Adam, but the right finger needs to be used for Nesinas Adam by Korban Chadas. Now, Elohada Amar Ravit, that which Ravit says, Yad Yad L'Kmitza, that we have a Gzeira Shava by Kmitza, by a Korban Mincha. It says Yad by Kmitza by Korban Mincha, and it says Yad by Mitzora. Regel L'Chalitza, it says Regel by Chalitza, and it says Regel by Mitzora. Ozen L'Ritzia, it says Ozen by a doorman, and it says Ozen also by Mitzora. To say that by Kmitza, you have to do komets you have to take the komets with your right hand. By chalitza, I think the point is that he takes off the shoe from her foot, right? And so I guess he would have to wait. I guess that's the shoe would probably be on her right foot, I guess is the point. And then also by the doorman, the nail would be in the right ear. You don't know what a doorman is, right? If you don't know what a doorman is, ask him what's up, and some of the veteran Babble on Talmud will explain to you what a doorman is. A doorman is an Eved Ivri, who decides after 6 years, Ahavti es Adoni Ahavti es Ishti ves Bonai, Ahavti es Adoni ves Ishti ves Bonai, Lo Eitzei Chinam or something. He wants to stay after 6 years, so we nail him to the door by his ear, by his right ear. Okay. So Lamali Midrab Babachana Nafka. So the shaila is, according to Rava, he had said that if it simply says Kahuna or right, so by Kmitza it says V'kamat Sakayin, I believe. I don't see that pasuk quoted anywhere. But I believe, or does it say, is it even maybe, where's that pasuk by Yad by Kmitza? What does it say? By Yaakov is a, no, but I think that there's a pasuk that says like B'kamat Sakayin or something, but right, by Kmitza it says Kehuna. And if we're going based on what Rava said earlier, that Kehuna is enough to require the right hand, so I shouldn't need this Yad between Kometz and Mitzora to say that Kmitza has to be with your right hand. It says Kahuna by Mitzora, by Kmitza. So I should already know that it requires the right hand. Right? Midirab Babachana nafka. It's learned that from what Rabbi Babachana said earlier, which is that whenever it says kihuna, and Rava understands that to mean kahuna or etzba, it requires the right hand. So why do I need the gzeir shav? So chad lekometz v'chad lekiddush kometz. Well, because as we know, kmitza parallels, right? Kmitza by a flower offering parallels the avodas adam. Well, kind of the avodas by the flower offering parallel the avodas adam by a zevach, by an animal offering. Right? The point is that by flower offering, there's kometz, which is like the shechita, but then you have to take the kometz and put it in a klisharis, which is like the kabbalah sadam, and that's right, receiving the kometz. So just like so there's two things. Yes, from the fact that it says kahuna by kometz, it means that you have to take the fistful with your right hand. But also, when the kometz is received into klisharis, the klisharis has to be held with the right hand, which I assume therefore means that you're probably going to have multiple Kohanim doing this. I imagined initially that you have one Kohen who takes the fistful and puts it into a klisharis that he's holding, but both the kmitza and the receiving the klisharis have to be in your right hand. I imagine you're probably going to need two Kohanim there. But anyways, we're saying, so we have kahuna to say you were a requirement for right hand, and also we have yad for mitzvah to have a requirement of right hand. That means a requirement of right hand for two avodas, for the kmitza as well as for the receiving of the kometz, the kiddush kometz, the klisharis being mikadesh the kometz inside the klisharis. So you have to be holding the klisharis with your right hand, and you do the kmitza with your right hand. Ule Rib Shimon to lo ba'i kiddush kometz. Now, according to Reb Shimon, who does not require that the kometz be put into a klisharis, according to Reb Shimon, you could simply take the kometz, right, take the fistful of flour, walk right up to the top of the mizbech and put it on the fire. You don't have to put it into a klisharis. So according to Reb Shimon, who does not require the klisharis, ulamando omar the Reb Shimon nami by kiddush kometz b'smol achshur machshur. And according to Reb Shimon, right, so Reb Shimon says that you don't have to put into klisharis, and even according to the opinion, it's the machlokas apparently. Even according to the opinion who says that according to Reb Shimon, you do have to put into klisharis, but still you'd be able to hold that klisharis with your left hand. So if that's the case, yad derav alamali, then why do you need this gzeir shav of yad to teach right hand? According to Reb Shimon, you don't even need to receive the kometz in a klisharis. And even according to the opinion, it says according to Reb Shimon, you do have to receive in the klisharis. You don't have to use your right hand. So what do you need yad for? What does it teach me? And if you're going to teach me, well, it teaches that the kometz itself, right? Okay, maybe the Kabbalah doesn't need a klisharis or right hand, but taking the fistful itself, it should be your right fistful. But no, the kmitza atzma midurav Yehuda brei durab chiyanafka. That's already learned out according to Rav Shimon, from Rav Yehuda brei durab chiya, the Amar Rav Yehuda brei durab chiya. My time of Rav Shimon, the Amar Kra, that what's pshat with Rav Shimon, that the pasuk says, what does Rashi say? Okay, fine. My time of Rav Shimon, the machshir aktaras kometz shelo bichli, imel lemizbech, right, the Rav Shimon doesn't require the vessel. Because the pasuk says, Kodesh Kodashim hi kachatas v'kashim. That the pasuk says that a korban mincha, a flower offering, is Kodesh Kodashim like a chatas and like an osham. And what that means is, bala ovda biyad, ovda biyamin, if kachatas, if you're going to want to skip the klisharis and just take a fistful of flour and burn it directly on the mizbeach, so then you're going to have to do that all with your right hand. If you're working directly with your hand, just taking that fistful and burning it right on the mizbeach, that's going to have to be your right hand, like a korban chatas. That the korban chatas, you have to do the nesina sadam with your right hand. But the bikli, but if you're going to put the kometz in a klisharis and do kabbalas a kometz, of the bikli, of the bismol ka'asham, then you can do it with your left hand like a korban asham. Just like you'd be able to do Kabbalah Sadam by a korban asham with your left hand, so also you could receive the kometz with your left hand. So we already know that that when it comes to working with your hands by a korban mincha, it's going to have to be with your right hand. So then again, what do we do with yad to teach your right hand by kometz? We already know that according to Reb Shimon from Rav Yehuda Breider Reb Chia. Lo nitzucha ela lekometz minchas chote, for the kmitza of a minchas chote, a korban ole v'yored, right? If you have somebody who, let's say, accidentally went into the Beis Hamikdash betuma, so he has to bring, as we know from Masechta Shavuos, a korban ole v'yored. If he can afford it, he brings I think a kispor or a seira. Alternatively, he could bring birds, and finally, he could bring a minchas chote. He could bring a korban mincha if that's what he can afford. So, Reb Shimon shelo yeh korban mehuder. That, where am I? The comments minchas chote sagadayte chamina Reb Shimon shelo yeh korban mehuder. That I may have had the thought to say, I may have had the option to say that since Reb Shimon's shita is that he doesn't, that minchas chote is without oil, it's without frankincense, because we don't want a korban chatos to be mehuder with oil and with frankincense. So I may have thought kikometz lo b'smol nami tiskasha. I might think that also this minchas chote, which we don't want to be mehuder, you can even use your left hand for it even. So Kamash Malan, that no, yad, you have to use your right hand. That is what he uses the Gezer Shav of yad for. Friends, that was Daf Chof Dalid of Masechta Zevachim. Givaldik. So on Daf Chof Dalid of Masechta Zevachim, we learn about the requirement for Kohanim to stand on the ground. That was the first section of today's Daf. Pretty straightforward. You gotta stand on the ground. And then, for the bulk of Daf Chof Dalid, we talked about the requirement for Kohanim to use their right hand. Essentially, in terms of the shitas, we saw that the Chacham say that you have to use your right hand for Kabbalah Sadam and for Zrika Sadam. The shita of Reb Shimon is that you really only need to use your right hand for the Nesina Sadam al Karnas Mizbeach by the Korban Chatas. However, we saw that Kabbalah Sadam and even Zrika Sadam is kosher with your left hand. Reb Shimon said that only the Kabbalah Sadam needs to be done with your right hand, but the Zrika Sadam would not need to be done with your right hand. And then the last section of today's daf was really about how the Chacham and Reb Shimon learn out their shitas about, we saw the opinion of Rabbi Babachana, as explained by Rava, that whenever you have a puzzle that says either kehuna or etzba, it means your right hand. Reb Shimon had said that's specifically etzba that requires right hand, but kehuna would not necessarily be enough. And that was kind of the limud over there, friends. That was the Chof Dalid of Masechta Zevachim. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.